The skies darken over Earth's major cities on July 7, 2045, as massive crystalline vessels emerge from hyperspace. Their hulls gleamed with an otherworldly iridescence, stretching over 15 kilometers in length, each one dwarfing the tallest human structures below. Panic erupted in the streets of Berlin, New York, Beijing, and Moscow as these behemoths cast their massive shadows across the metropolitan landscapes. Admiral Zexthor, Supreme Commander of the Galactic Empire's 7th Conquest Fleet, stood on his flagship's command bridge, his tall, angular frame reflected in the polished obsidian floors. A holoscreen displayed the United Nations Security Council, hastily assembled to address this unprecedented first contact. Primitives of Earth, his voice resonated through global communication channels. Your planet now falls under protection and authority of the Galactic Empire. Your immediate surrender will ensure a peaceful transition. His four-fingered hand gestured dismissively at the data scrolling before him. We have analyzed your military capabilities extensively. The Admiral's crystalline eyes narrowed as he reviewed Earth's defense systems. A cold laugh escaped his gray-skinned face. Projectile weapons? Primitive chemical propellants launching metal slugs. He turned to his subordinate, Commander Vexrau. They still use gunpowder and shells. How quaint. The UN Security Council watched in growing unease as Zexthor displayed holographic images of Earth's most advanced weapon systems, methodically dismissing each one. Your nuclear devices cannot penetrate our shields. Your railguns are centuries behind our technology. And these... He paused, showing footage of anti-aircraft batteries. These antiquated cannon systems are particularly amusing. The Empire hasn't used kinetic weapons since the Dark Ages. What Zexthor failed to realize, in his technological arrogance, was that humanity's greatest strength often lay in the very simplicity he mockingly dismissed. In the Pentagon's underground war room, General Marcus Steele stood before a table of grim-faced military leaders, his weathered hands pressed against satellite images of the alien vessels. At 63, he was the oldest serving general in the U.S. Army, and perhaps the only one who still remembered his grandfather's war stories. "Gentlemen, our most advanced weapons are useless," Steele declared, replaying footage of missiles dissolving against alien shields. "But our research team has discovered something peculiar." He nodded to Dr. Sarachun, who projected analysis data. "Their shields are specifically calibrated for energy-based weapons, plasma, laser, even nuclear. They're so advanced, they're actually vulnerable to something far more primitive." The room erupted in murmurs as Steele continued. "My grandfather served in the Pacific, but he always talked about the German 88s, how they could reach higher and hit harder than any other AA gun of World War II. We've been thinking too far forward. We need to step back." 48 hours later, Steele found himself in a Munich nursing home, sitting across from 97-year-old Colonel Hans Weber, one of the last surviving Wehrmacht artillery commanders. Weber's rheumy eyes sparked to life as Steele explained the situation. The 88. She could reach 8,000 meters effective ceiling. Simple physics. No fancy electronics to fail. The next week was a blur of activity. Weber made calls to his network of military history enthusiasts and museum curators. Preserved 88mm flak guns were located in military museums across Europe and America. Some were still in working condition, maintained by dedicated preservationists. In an abandoned hangar outside Berlin, Steele watched as Weber supervised young engineers restoring the massive guns. The old German's hands trembled with age, but his mind remained sharp. "The secret," he explained, adjusting the elevation mechanism, "is in the simplicity. No computer targeting, just well-trained crews and precision engineering." Steele's phone buzzed constantly with updates. 3 guns restored in Amsterdam, 5 more in Belgium, a cache of original ammunition found in a Norwegian mountain bunker. But time was running out. Above their heads, the alien ships maintained their ominous vigil, waiting for humanity's surrender. "They expect us to fight with our most advanced weapons," Steele muttered, running his hand along the 88's barrel. "That's exactly why we'll hit them with our oldest." Weber nodded, a knowing smile crossing his weathered face. "Sometimes, Her General, the old ways are best." Dawn broke over Berlin as alien dropships descended from the massive vessels above, their energy shields creating rippling patterns in the morning mist. Admiral Zexthor had chosen the German capital for his first demonstration of power, a decision that would prove fatally ironic. Colonel Hans Weber stood beside a restored 88mm flak gun on the grounds of the Tempelhof Airport, his aged frame supported by a wooden cane. Around him, a hastily trained crew of young German soldiers waited tensely. 5 other 88s were positioned strategically around the city, disguised under camouflage netting and hidden among the ruins of old World War II bunkers. "They're deploying in a standard assault pattern," Weber observed through his binoculars, his voice steady despite his years. "Just like the British used to do." He turned to his crew, speaking in rapid German. "Load high explosive shells. Wait for my command." Above, the alien ships began their attack. Modern surface-to-air missiles launched from Berlin's defense batteries, only to dissipate harmlessly against the Imperial shields. Zexthor's mocking laughter echoed through the emergency broadcast system. "Is this truly Earth's best defense?" Weber's hands tightened on his cane. "Crew ready," he barked. The young soldiers moved with practiced precision, just as he had drilled them. The massive 88mm shell slid into the breach with a satisfying clang. "Range, 6,400 meters," called out the spotter. "Elevation, 67 degrees," responded the gunner. "Wind speed, 8 knots northwest." Weber closed his eyes for a moment, remembering countless similar moments from his youth. When he opened them, his voice rang with authority. "Fire!" The 88 roared to life, its deep thunder echoing across Berlin. The shell streaked skyward, a simple projectile against space-age technology. Through his binoculars, Weber tracked its arc time seemed to slow. The shell struck the nearest dropship's shield and passed straight through. A fraction of a second later, it detonated against the vessel's hull. The explosion tore through the alien alloy, sending the ship into an uncontrolled spin. Flames erupted from its engines as it plummeted toward the Spree River. Absolute silence fell over the battlefield. Even the alien broadcast went quiet. Then Weber's voice cut through the stillness. "Load." Again, the other 88s opened fire, their synchronized barrage catching 3 more dropships. Alien shields, calibrated for energy weapons, proved useless against simple kinetic projectiles. Pure physics delivered at supersonic speeds. In his flagship above, Admiral Zexthor stared in disbelief at the burning wreckage of his dropships. "Impossible," he whispered. "They're using antiques." Back at Tempelhof, Weber allowed himself a grim smile as he watched another alien ship fall. He turned to General Steele, who had been observing nearby. "The 88 always was a good gun," he said matter-of-factly. "Perhaps now these aliens will learn what we learned long ago. Never underestimate a weapon simply because it is old." The Battle of Berlin had begun, and humanity's oldest weapons were proving to be its most effective defense. Admiral Zexthor paced the obsidian floors of his flagship's war room, his clawed hands clasped behind his back. The holographic displays around him showed the smoldering remains of 4 dropped ships in Berlin, each destroyed by weapons that, according to Imperial records, should have been obsolete centuries ago. "Explain this to me again," he growled at his chief engineer, who cowered before the assembled war council. "How did their primitive projectiles penetrate our shields?" The engineer's fingers danced across his datapad. My lord, our shield technology evolved to counter energy-based weapons, plasma, laser, particle beams. Over millennia, we perfected defenses against increasingly sophisticated energy attacks. He paused, swallowing hard. But these humans, they're using simple kinetic force. Pure mass and velocity. Commander Vex Rao stepped forward, his ceremonial armor glinting under the harsh lights. Our ancestors abandoned physical projectiles so long ago that we never thought to maintain defenses against them. Our shields are designed to dissipate energy, not stop solid matter. The War Council erupted in angry murmurs. 1,000 years of imperial military doctrine was being challenged by weapons that predated spaceflight. On the main screen, surveillance footage showed more of the human guns being positioned around other major cities. These 88mm weapons, Zextor spat the words like poison. They're not even powered. No fusion cores, no plasma chambers. Just springs and steel? Yes, my lord, the engineer confirmed. Their simplicity is what makes them dangerous. Our targeting systems are calibrated to track energy signatures. These projectiles are essentially invisible until they impact. Zextor slammed his fist on the holographic table, causing the display to flicker. Can we recalibrate the shields? Not without a complete redesign of our defense systems. We'd need to return to the Empire's shipyards. The modifications would take months, perhaps years. The Admiral turned to stare out the viewport at Earth below. More reports were coming in. Humans worldwide were pulling ancient anti-aircraft guns from museums and storage, preparing them for battle. Their entire invasion force, the pride of the Empire's fleet, was vulnerable to technology that should have been relegated to history books. How? He whispered, more to himself than his council. How did we become so focused on advancement that we forgot to guard against the basics of physics itself? No one in the War Council had an answer. The Empire's fatal flaw had been exposed by a weapon nearly as old as mechanized warfare itself. Colonel Weber stood at the center of the Berlin Air Defense School, now converted into a global training hub for restored World War II anti-aircraft batteries. Around him, crews from 24 nations practiced on 88mm guns, their commands echoing in multiple languages across the tarmac. Speed is life. Weber's voice carried over the din, his cane tapping rhythm as crews practiced loading drills. 4 shells per minute, no less. The Empire won't give you time for mistakes. Despite his age, he moved from gun to gun, adjusting angles, correcting stances, sharing wisdom earned in combat 7 decades ago. In London, a Japanese crew working a restored British 3.7-inch AA gun scored their first kill, sending an alien fighter spiraling into the Thames. From the deserts outside Cairo, Egyptian forces unleashed a barrage from refurbished German 88s, their shells punching through Imperial scout ships like paper. Even in Moscow, where Soviet-era 85mm guns had been pulled from monuments, crews celebrated successful hits against the previously invincible enemy. Admiral Zextor's holographic transmissions became increasingly erratic. This is impossible. His voice boomed over conquered territories. Your primitive weapons cannot defeat the Empire, but the burning wreckage of his ships told a different story. In just 2 weeks, humanity had destroyed 37 Imperial vessels using weapons that predated spaceflight. At the Pentagon, General Steele reviewed the mounting success reports. A restored American 90mm battery in San Francisco had protected the entire West Coast. Brazilian forces, using 88s provided by Argentina, had decimated an attempted landing in Rio de Janeiro. The aliens' technological superiority had become their greatest weakness. They simply couldn't comprehend or adapt to such basic physics. They're getting desperate, Weber observed, watching Imperial ships attempting new evasive patterns above Berlin. See how they fly? They're trying to predict our aim points, but they don't understand manual targeting. He turned to his international students. We don't need computers. We need instinct, experience, and steel. In orbit, Zextor's flagship suffered its first direct hit. An 88mm shell from Weber's personal battery had caught the vessel during a low-altitude pass, piercing its command deck. Though the damage was minimal, the psychological impact was devastating. The Empire's most advanced warship, vulnerable to a weapon that had first seen action in 1939. "My lord," Commander Vexrau reported, "we've lost 15% of our fleet. The humans are expanding their anti-aircraft coverage daily. They're teaching each other, sharing these ancient weapons and techniques." Zextor stared at the tactical display, watching yet another of his ships succumb to what he had dismissed as obsolete technology. His claws dug into the arm of his command chair. In his arrogance, he had never considered that humanity's greatest strength might lie not in its advancement, but in its ability to repurpose its past. Weber's words to his students proved prophetic. "Sometimes, children, the old ways are the best ways. The Empire forgot the basics of war, but we remember." The dark of night shattered as Admiral Zextor launched his desperate final assault. 5,000 Imperial ships descended simultaneously toward Earth's major cities. "If we cannot conquer," his transmission boomed, "we shall obliterate." But Earth was ready. In Berlin, Colonel Weber stood at his command post, coordinating with gun batteries worldwide through a hastily established radio network. "Wait," his steady voice carried to crews across the globe. "Let them come closer." The Imperial ships dropped lower, their energy weapons charging. Just as they reached optimal firing position, approximately 7,000 meters altitude, Weber's voice cracked across the airwaves. "All batteries fire at will." The world erupted in thunder. Thousands of restored anti-aircraft guns fired in near-perfect synchronization. The sky filled with tracer rounds and explosive shells. Imperial ships began falling by the dozens, then hundreds. Their shields, still useless against kinetic weapons, offered no protection. Zextor's flagship descended toward Berlin, attempting to target Weber's command post. The old colonel calmly stepped to his personal 88, the same gun that had scored the first hit weeks ago. "One last time, old friend," he whispered, laying his weathered hands on the controls. The 88 roared. The shell struck Zextor's flagship directly in its power core. The massive vessel split in half, its crystalline structure shattering spectacularly against the dawn sky. The Admiral's final transmission cut off mid-scream. Without their commander, the Imperial fleet fell into chaos. Within hours, the surviving ships retreated to hyperspace, leaving Earth's atmosphere littered with the wreckage of their most advanced vessels, all felled by technology they had considered beneath their notice. Signal from the Imperial High Command. General Steele reported, stepping up beside Weber. "They're requesting terms of surrender." Weber nodded, finally allowing himself to lean heavily on his cane. "Not bad for an obsolete weapon, Jaw." In the Grand Hall of the United Nations, Earth's victory over the Galactic Empire was formalized with the signing of the Sol System Independence Treaty. Imperial representatives, stripped of their former arrogance, agreed to recognize Earth as a sovereign planet and establish a 10-light-year exclusion zone around the solar system. Colonel Hans Weber and General Marcus Steele stood as honored guests at the ceremony. Their strategy had not only saved Earth, but revolutionized galactic warfare. Military observers from a dozen alien civilizations studied the restored 88mm guns, taking careful notes on what they called hybrid defense doctrine, the integration of simple kinetic weapons with advanced technology. Earth's military forces underwent a transformation. Modern missile batteries were now complemented by restored anti-aircraft guns. Space defense platforms combined energy weapons with good old-fashioned artillery. As Weber often remarked to his students at the newly established Global Defense Academy, never abandon the basics. In Berlin, the 88 that fired the war's first successful shot was placed in a museum of victory. Beside it stands a simple plaque with Weber's words, "Technology without wisdom is just complexity waiting to fail." The Empire had learned a costly lesson. Sometimes the oldest solutions are the best solutions, and understanding the past is the key to securing the future.